You're listening to Hockey Talk on the Rock
Alright, stop!
with Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
We are back doing the Hockey Talk on the Rock here on Salt Spring. Laura, I'm Keith. It is Wednesday, June the 2nd, and we got just a few minor topics we're going to discuss today. I'm going to throw to Laura right off the bat to talk about the Canucks news.
Yeah, so the Canucks had two little kind of pieces of information, I guess. Well, one main one that's Canuck related, and that is that they signed their first round pick from 2 years ago, Vasily Podkolzin, and I think this is good news. He looks like he's going to be ready for the NHL next year. He had really good playoffs in Russia, and from all the reports about him, he's meant to be kind of like a very good defensive winger that can also produce offense. So, you know, if he comes to Vancouver next year and he's on like either their third or their fourth line, it's not the end of the world, but he'll hopefully kind of move up into that second line position on the wing.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting news for them, and it's going to see if it paid off to pick him, because they knew they weren't getting him for 2 years.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's exciting, the prospect of maybe a potential, Mark Stone, Patrice Bergeron, high-end type player, but we'll see. That's high hopes at this point.
Very high. And the Canucks don't have like the greatest history with Russian players, but it would be kind of cool to see this one pan out. I mean, obviously they had McGillney. That's like the best I can think of.
Bure.
And Bure, obviously. But, recently it hasn't
hit
been
and miss,
very.
yeah, for sure.
So.
Like they say, for every Bure, there's been a gold open,
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. Your other piece?
The other piece is just about the draft lottery, which again is like general news more.
Right. Yeah.
I guess we could touch on really briefly that it does look like the Twins are going to join the Canucks management. Like this week, it's kind of been more solidified because it went quiet for a while after the initial announcement, which was, tied to Benning is staying announcement. But it sounds like they're going to join his group kind of in some way, and that they're going to learn, I guess, from Benning. So that would be kind of the only other thing, but there's still no news on that front. But jumping over to the draft lottery that just happened today, for like the first time in forever, it feels like the Canucks didn't fall back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a win on its own. Stayed at number 9, which in this draft isn't a bad thing. Again, I think any of the top 10 picks, really any of the first round picks that we were talking about earlier, is probably pretty good. But Buffalo ended up winning the draft lottery, so they'll pick first, and then Seattle is picking second, which is a little bit annoying, but, it's okay. And, Buffalo is fascinating because they fired, like, a bunch of their scouts last summer, which we talked about before. So it'll be very interesting to see what they do. And I kind of, again, I've talked about this before, I feel sorry for that team. They've been through a lot, and it doesn't really look like it's getting any better. I wonder if they could use the fact that they have another first overall pick, though, to maybe try and convince Eichel to stay. So we'll see about that. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was just hoping it wasn't going to be someone has been like another New Jersey first or something like that. And then I started to get anxious about Seattle getting it and how I didn't really want them to get it. Like, the first year luck that Vegas had.
Yeah.
Not so much in the draft lottery, but...
Yeah, everything else.
So, yeah, it did kind of feel like a win that the Canucks didn't fall back. And then my guys didn't, unsurprisingly, stayed at 13, which, because of, we've talked about over and over how we think the scouting is going to be so all over the map for this year's draft, I'm not disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know there's some people with the Canucks specifically that were disappointed because at the end of the year they won a few games and that decreased their draft lottery odds. But I ultimately don't think it matters for this draft. Like, there are drafts that have happened in the past where maybe that was more of a thing, but for this one, I think 9 is...
This one's kind of almost a gimme type.
Yeah. We'll see how good their scouting really is, kind of thing.
We'll see, and that's going to be coming up next month, right?
Yes.
At 2 days, but after the
I think it's
expansion?
after the expansion, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Both those will be exciting, and we're going to have to do some mock drafts coming up.
It's pretty good.
So that was exciting because that literally happened like 2 hours ago.
Yes. Oh yeah, and I'll briefly say too, the reason why I'm wearing my Bo Horvat jersey is because that was the last time the Canucks picked at 9.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice tie-in. I'm going to be wearing, I think, Winnipeg for as long as they're still in the playoffs.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Speaking of the playoffs, we will segue to the big one. It's still kind of hard to wrap my head around the fact that Toronto lost that series. It shouldn't have happened that way, but I mean, I guess when it comes down to what everybody's harping on is like the big guys didn't perform under pressure, and
Yeah.
it's got to be really frustrating as a Maple Leaf fan because I was super frustrated as just a typical poolie who had some Maple Leafs in my pool. So, it's hard to really describe the feeling because it's just one of those things. It shouldn't have happened.
It shouldn't have happened. I don't think that situation would literally happen to any other team. Like I said last summer, I thought this was the year that the Maple Leafs would break that curse and they'd win a round. And then when it looked like they were playing Montreal, I was like, okay, like the only chance that Montreal has of winning this series is if Carey Price is like lights out good. And he was good. I don't think he was amazing. And Montreal deserves credit. Like I think they switched how they played after they lost that third game. And they really started, to play kind of more like the Islanders almost, where they were really defensive and then just pounced on their opportunities. And Price was good, and that was enough. The thing that I would be frustrated about if I was a Maple Leafs fan is like, and I'm not, I actually think this is completely hilarious, and it kind of made my year, to be completely honest. But the fact that they have no killer instinct, like, at all. They fought back in 2 games, right? In Game 5 and Game 6, they could have won the series. They could have won it in Game 5. And to fight back and be like, okay, we're going to tie it, but then they just can't punch it home, basically, right? And, like, again, so many people have touched on, like, their role players played really well. Like, Spezza was really good, and Kerfoot was really good, and Jack Campbell gave them the goaltending that they needed really to win. And it was really their 2 big stars. Like, Nylander was great, right? And he kind of gets excluded from this because he had a really good playoffs. But Marner and Matthews were awful. Like, I don't think you can explain it any other way than that. And, like, Matthews was better last year in the play-ins, but Marner was bad last year as well. And it is becoming a talking point, right? You can't just be, it's like McDavid. Like, you can be really good regular season players, and that's great. But you've got to figure out a way to win in the playoffs. And I do now, kind of looking at that Montreal series, and they picked up like Corey Perry, and he for his whole career he's played better in the playoffs than he has in the regular season. And you look at what the Maple Leafs did, and like everyone last year, myself included, was like, yeah, Kyle Dubas did a really good job, and I don't really think this is his fault. But you bring in Joe Thornton, and I just started thinking about it yesterday, and it's like, okay, well, Thornton was, kind of the face of all those Sharks teams that had this exact problem, and maybe he wasn't the right person to bring into that locker room to try and get them over the hump. And I don't think it's all his fault, because, again, I think it goes down to your big boys need to perform. Yeah. But it did kind of give me a chuckle that this is the closest thing. Like, the Sharks from, like, the early 2000s is the closest that I've seen to that. And they've won rounds, right? Like, it wasn't like they couldn't make it out of the first round. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not going to hammer anything more to death about this because everybody else has. Yeah. And, like, the reality is kind of sunk in, and it's crazy. But I will say, I can bet that you'd think Marner and Matthews are going to reach out to Marc-Andre Fleury about his sports psychologist he saw after year after year after year that he collapsed every first round of the playoffs, and like Pittsburgh had their was in their prime of their runs and their window, and he would just collapse, and then he got it back together, right? Yeah,
and okay, I actually remember the other point we were going to talk about, but I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Because the other person that I want to talk about from a Montreal point of view from that series is Philip Deneau, because he's a UFA this summer, and he's getting a lot of the credit for shutting down those 2 guys. And I mean, he did a very good job, and I wonder how much money he's gonna make based off of that. Yeah, not again. It doesn't seem like it's gonna be Montreal, right?
No. But I'm glad you brought up Montreal because I did want to touch on them, and I just wanted to kind of point out that like I had a lot of faith in what like we talked about it last year. I liked what they did in the offseason. I picked them to win the North, so I feel like I shouldn't be so surprised.
I think it's just how they finished the year. To me, it's very similar to Winnipeg. That like because both those teams looked so disinterested in playing hockey for like the last 2 months basically, and then it's playoffs, and really like Montreal the first 4 games weren't that good. Like they won the first game, but a lot of that was like Tavares got hurt and there's it was a weird game, but those next 3 games they didn't look great. And then like that team, I will give credit to like again to like Price and Weber and like the guys who've been there for a few years that really do seem to know how to win. It's almost like the opposite of Toronto, where like they don't, and it just something happens in the playoffs and it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't.
They brought in Toffoli, who's got a couple cups too, which probably doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
What was one we forgot?
Okay, so the thing that we forgot to talk about, and then I'm gonna really quickly loop back to the Leafs, because I just want your thoughts on one thing.
Okay.
So the NHL has been slowly releasing the finalists for their awards.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, and so the first one is the Vezina, and I don't think it's much of a surprise. The 3 finalists. So there's Vasilevsky. There's Marc-Andre Fleury, which is why I remembered it, and Philip Grubauer in Colorado. I think it's really between Vasilevsky and Fleury.
That's what I was going to say too.
And to me, I kind of think Fleury's going to get it for 2 reasons, because like Vasilevsky's already won it, and sometimes that goes against players, and like writers kind of decide that they want to give it to the guy who hasn't done it, or like it's going to be his year.
Yeah.
And also because of Fleury's age, I think it is impressive that he put up the numbers. That being said, won't be surprised if it was Vasilevsky. If it was Grubauer, I would be really shocked.
Do you think it'll play a factor that Vegas was the second best team in the league and Tampa was third in their division?
I don't think it can, because those divisions weren't equal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
But
I think it's a 2-horse race as well. And I think we talked about that at our mid-season rankings.
Yeah.
I think we had both of them up there.
Yeah. So yeah, and I know like some Winnipeg fans were upset and some Nashville fans were upset because they thought like Saros and Hellebuck should have been nominated over Grubauer. I think you could have put any of those 3 guys and it probably would have been fine. So anyway, and then the other award that they released the finalists to today was the Ted Lindsay, and that's all 3 of the now first round golfers, second round golfers. So Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, and Austin Matthews. And I think everyone knows who's going to win this award. It's going to be McDavid. So.
Yeah, since it's the MVP as voted on by the players, I feel like the majority of the players in the league are going to throw their first place votes at McDavid. I wonder, it'll be interesting if it'll be unanimous and if that's ever happened before. I'm sure back in the Gretzky days.
Yeah.
Before Lemieux.
Before Lemieux, for sure. I would think so. I mean, I feel like Crosby, almost a bit like how players view Carey Price, might get some votes just because of his like longevity.
Right.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it was unanimous. That was an amazing season, right? So there we go. All right, so I got a quick little game for you.
Okay.
It's called Staying or Leaving.
Okay.
Just gonna name out some people connected to Toronto and who you think is going to be back for next year.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll start with the guys that could possibly leave, and I feel like this one is the easiest one with Freddie Anderson.
Leaving.
Zach Hyman.
Staying.
Okay. Kyle Dubas.
Staying.
Shanahan.
Staying.
Okay. Keith.
Yeah, I think they're going to stay. Stay
Okay.
with him.
Okay, Riley.
Leaving. I can see that one.
I can see it happening because he's been there for all of the losing, and maybe it's time for a change. And then the big one is Marner.
Staying.
Okay, I'll throw in one more, Nylander.
Staying.
And the only reason why I did that is because I think if the Maple Leafs really are serious about switching things up, I think they almost have to trade Nylander, because I don't think you can trade Marner.
No, I think I read today they said they're not going to trade Marner, or Dubas did.
Yeah.
I think they're going to give this whole thing one more year.
Yeah.
Starting with Keefe, I think he would be the first to go, but I feel like at the end of next year, depending on how the year and everything goes, then they would probably switch it all up at the top two.
Yeah.
You didn't ask about the old guys.
Oh yeah. Spezza, I feel like that one's easy.
Staying.
And then Thornton.
Leaving.
Yeah.
And Simmons leaving.
Simmons is leaving as well, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I don't really have anything that I would disagree with there. I feel like I probably would answer them all the same. I think in terms of like management and coaching, like, you know, I wouldn't be shocked if something did happen with Dubas or even Shanahan, because this now really is like their plan, right?
It is, yeah. One thing that'll lead to the last thing I want to talk about too is with my thinking that Morgan Riley might be out of town because of what we just said.
Right.
Seth Jones.
Yes.
Apparently he's told Columbus he's not gonna re-sign now, and he might, or maybe is going to test the UFA market at the end of the next season. So a lot of people are talking about how they'll probably trade him before it gets to that point. Could you see a Riley for Jones
deal? I think there's something there between Columbus and Toronto, again, because they have history, and also I think that, like, Toronto, one of the problems that they had this year, and, like, you know, Tyson Barrie has a lot of problems defensively, but he was decent at moving the puck for them, and I think they did miss having, like, a puck-moving defenseman, and so Jones would fill that role, but I feel bad because, again, like, out of probably all the people on the Leafs, like, I quite like Morgan Riley, and I think he's kind of underrated for his overall game, but I could see it happening. I think there'd have to be a bit, like, probably a bit, I don't know who would have to give a bit more, though, but I don't feel like it's totally even.
No, yeah, I think Toronto would have to give more.
Yeah.
And I'll quickly throw out that I bet you Philly makes a big push.
Yeah.
They miss Niskanen a lot,
Yeah.
and Seth Jones is not Niskanen. He's more skilled in every way, but they need someone to play on the blue line for sure, and I could see them
Making a push.
Yeah, I mean they're in the same division as the only thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but they've made deals before. It's how Columbus got Bobrovsky in the first place.
Yes, that's true.
So that went well. Yeah, I mean that's all I got on the Seth Jones talk.
Yeah, and the last kind of really tiny thing I want to say, which kind of connects back to the Leafs, but it's not just them, but Carey Price winning that series, like as a either player or goalie, anything here, making it to the second round, was the first player ever with a double-digit salary to make it past the first round.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So that to me kind of ties back to the Canucks, and you know, with these two contracts coming up, like, really try to keep it below 10, and also like that stat's gonna obviously change. Like, it has Price won, he's in the second round, but when, like, once the cap goes up a bit, right, and the proportion of the cap or whatever
in 5 years.
In 5 years, yeah, it will change a bit, but yeah, something you keep in mind, and yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, I think that's the end of our talking hockey for today. We'll be back, I don't know, sometime soon to talk probably about the wrap up of some of the second round series, unless there's a bunch of news between now and then.
Yeah, sounds good.
So thank you for watching Hockey Talk on the Rock. Until next time.
Woo-hoo.